Hi everyone, Matthew here again with Flashbulb Memories Photo Booth. This is the third video of the series that started with Tave and how to get data out of Tave using webhooks. It proceeded into the second video, which is essentially how to format that data in Google Sheets through a Zapier integration to be able to essentially use it in more places and be able to customize what happens with that data. At the end of it, we covered how to actually use the data timing and city or venue location to update a specific time for scheduling purposes, which is leading into this video where we're going to cover how to use that Google Sheet data to translate into Google Calendar invites for essentially as automated as possible hands-off scheduling. So we're going to dive in now. If you haven't already looked at the first video, not necessary for this one. This is kind of applicable regardless of if you're using Tave or not, but you'll want to follow that second video that goes over how I set up this spreadsheet in case you want to follow along with what my columns are and why. In any case, this video should help you figure out a bit more about the Zapier integration with Google Sheets to Google Calendars and hopefully help you automate your scheduling and make that an easier task. So let's dive right in. So in Zapier here, you can see I've already got a Zap set up. If you don't have this, just go ahead and create a new Zap. And the first trigger you're going to do is this Google Sheet trigger. So I'm going to edit it and I'm going to just walk you through what this is. So once you have your account chosen and your trigger here is going to be based off of the spreadsheet that you're working in. In our case, this is this spreadsheet here that we covered in video 2. And we're going to choose the worksheet if you have multiple worksheets. And then the trigger column is going to be any column. So this first step is basically going to watch for new data to come into this spreadsheet, which right now it is through webhooks. And when it sees anything change, it's going to trigger this Zap. So now the next step is we're going to create this action called Find or Create Event in Google Calendar. So we're going to sync our Google Calendar here. If you haven't already done that, choose your Google Calendar account. And the event is, or the action is going to be Find Event. And you can see I've got my account connected here. And on the setup action stage, this is where we get a little complicated. So let's dive in here and go through this step by step. So of course we want to make sure that the calendar we're looking at is the one where we want these events to post. So in my case, I have a shared photo booth events calendar. I also have others. So just make sure you choose the right one for you. Next, for our search term, we want to choose that ID field. So the ID field is essentially, for what we're using, it's in Tave, it's the unique identifier for that job or event. So on this one here, this is my ID that it would be searching for. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change here. Let's see, that is the ID we want. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to retest this trigger so that we can see updated data for what I'm looking at. So you can see this was last tested a week ago. I'm going to just click load more, which you'll have to do this step in order to see your data. So here's an event right here that got pulled in. So we're just going to continue. And I'll open back up step 2 here, set up action. So now we have a valid search term. So this search term is the ID for this particular event, which is for a wedding here. On May 14th. So let me dive into my spreadsheet, go to May 14th. Here's the latest one that synced, and you can see that ID ending in 257. And here it is, 257. So that's going to use the Tave ID, the unique identifier that will not change no matter what other event details change, to search the calendar. So next we'll scroll down. You'll want to make sure this box is checked that says Create Google Calendar Detailed Event if it doesn't yet exist. And then we're just going to basically fill in the summary of the Google Calendar invite as well as the description. So this could be whatever you want it to be. In my case, I created the summary to be the job name in my CRM Tave and then followed by the ID. And so that's going to allow it to, when I create this next step that we're going to get into in a minute, it'll search for this ID. And because it's in my title, if it finds it, it will update that event but not create a new one. So it is imperative that you have the ID identifier in the summary here. Could possibly work in the description, but I'd recommend putting it in the title somewhere. Next, we're going to go down to the description here. And you can see I've typed up a lot of this stuff. This is just manually. You can change that to whatever you want it to be. And this is basically for me to identify what these fields are on the right, since it's only going to pull in the actual variables. It's not going to say bride and groom. It's just going to pull in Kate and Nick. So these variables are created by just clicking into this field and using this insert data option here to choose what you want to show on that calendar invite. So in Tave, we have all these custom fields that I've created, and I want those custom fields to show up on the calendar invite so that my employees know what they need to do, how they need to be prepared, what equipment they need to bring, etc. So I'll just go through a few of those here. But again, this is pretty much whatever you want it to show, as long as you have that original webhook from video 1 and 2 going through to Google Sheets, you can pull it here. So I have things like whether or not props are needed, what the package is, the start time of the event, in terms of when the actual timing of when the booth is active, because that's going to be different than the scheduled time, which we'll get to in a minute. Setup location, if there's food, vendor meals provided, if there's any notes specific for the event that I created or that the client created, all that stuff will show up on the Google Calendar invite. So once you have everything in your description that you want to show, and you can always come back and update this if you want to add more later, the next step is going to be the location. So in this one here, you'll need to choose the exact address. So in my case, I have this primary session location address, which on my Google Sheet is column N, actually address, column O. So when I open this, it will have the full address, which if we plug that into Google Maps, it will link us right to that venue. So make sure that you do have the accurate address. If it's a field that you don't have the full address, you might need to go back to whatever your CRM is or Tave and make sure that you've designated the right field for this. So this is going to pop in that location so that you can easily, in the Google Calendar, touch that address and navigate to it. Next thing we want to do is the start and end time. So the start and end time is going to be the job date, and then you'll have a space. And in my case, that start time is what's called the arrive at storage by. So the arrive at storage by is essentially, in the video number 2 that I covered at the end, we're doing a custom formula in our Google Sheet here to create this arrive at storage by time, which varies depending on the venue name. And that custom formula is looking at what time do they want us to have the photo booth open or ready by. And then it's subtracting a number of hours so that my people know when they need to arrive to pick up the equipment, the travel time that's included, all that stuff necessary to get there and finish setup by this set time. So if you want to follow along with that formula, go back to video 2, skip to the end. Once you have that here, you're just going to plug in the job date in that start time, and then the end date and the end time. Likewise, pop in your session end date, and for the end time, same thing, just put in the end time of when that needs to be over by. Now scrolling through here, the only other thing we need to do on this one is under the attendees. So for the attendees, I have 2 fields, attendee lead and attendee support, because we do basically staff 2 people at every event. And those fields you can see are here, attendee lead and attendee support. Now this can be updated in Tave for those of you using Tave, and it can be exported to Google Sheets, or in my case, I actually leave these blank and I add them here manually so that I can basically change who's on the schedule quicker and not have that be a kind of a permanent thing in my CRM. So for this one here, I am actually personally going to be working this, so I'm going to just put my name. And the most important part here is that you use the right email. So if you use the wrong email, or if you don't have the email filled out, they're not going to get the invite. So you want to make sure you have the right email here. So I'm going to put in that email. And we don't have an exact start time here. This is actually going to change, so I'm not going to fill that out just yet, but we can continue. Which is why you can see there's no data, because this was not previously filled out, but that's okay. Now, if you scroll through, you can fill some of this stuff out. I have my email pop-up reminders set so that every event, those same notifications will be given to myself or my employees, but you can change this however you see fit, how early you want those reminders to show, whatever you prefer for those settings here. Now, once that's done, you will, obviously you'll want to test this action to make sure that it works. Ideally, you have data that you can use to be able to see on your calendar if that showed up properly. So in this case here, let's actually take a look at this April 23rd event. So you can see this is how it shows up, all of that data that comes over. But first, let's jump back to Zapier and finish creating this here. So an event was sent to Google Calendar. Scroll down. Once that's tested, you can move on to the next step. So this next step is update event in Google Calendar. So the first step basically said, hey, we're looking for this event in the spreadsheet. If we don't find it in the calendar, we're going to create it. And if we do find it, then we're going to basically update it, which is this next step here. So now if we scroll through, everything's going to be pretty much the same as how we were just set up, with two differences. One, the event that we want to update is going to be, instead of that Google Sheet ID, it's going to be specifically the event that we just found in that find or create event in Google Calendar step. And you can see it's a different unique ID here. So that's going to guarantee we find that calendar event. So that's what we're going to have for the event field here. And then everything else, you'll just basically make exactly the same. But when we get to the bottom, you'll see the attendees is blank. So that's going to basically update the event while keeping the same attendees that you previously invited. So instead of them seeing a new invite that says they declined, or not that they declined, but it shows that they haven't accepted every time that there's an event change, it will show them as essentially permanently accepted, and it will constantly push those changes to their calendar automatically without you having to worry about them seeing them. Now, if you did put the attendees in here just like the last time, then what's going to happen is it's going to remove that calendar invite, and it's going to send them a new invite, and it's going to show them as unaccepted. So however you prefer to manage that, that might be best for you, but I found that that just makes things more complicated and harder for my people to see the most accurate, up-to-date calendar, while also ensuring that they've accepted it and that they can work that event. So with that said, we're going to just scroll through this, continue. And now I have two final steps, which are optional if you choose to do this. Because it's using the same attendees as that invite step in step 3, what happens if that attendee, for instance, declines the event? Maybe they can't work it, you didn't check their schedule beforehand, and they say, sorry, I can't work that event. Well, if they decline that event, there's no steps yet that say go back and re-invite someone new. If you go into the Google Sheet here and I change this email to someone else, then that's great, but it's not going to update it on the Google Calendar. So you have two options. One, you can go into the Google Calendar event, you can edit that event, there we go, and you can add guests, you can invite them manually. Fine, but the easier approach is to build out additional steps in this Zap that will essentially look for certain conditions, and if those are found or not found, it will invite the new person that you've changed this to, the new email and name from the Google Sheet. So let's just go through this. Sounds complicated, but it's fairly easy. So we add a step here. This is a filter by Zapier step. Filter by Zapier, continue, and the filter that we're looking for is basically we're looking at this field in the Google Sheet, which is called Attendee Update. I created it all the way at the end here. You can see it's column AI. And this Attendee Update field, if it sees that there's anything that exists here, I've got a date that just says when I last updated it, but we could literally just change this to X, it doesn't matter. If it sees that there's a field that's existing, then it will update that Google Sheet, it'll send all that new information, and it will continue. It'll continue this step basically. Or if the attendee emails do not exist, so if I have not yet filled these out, but I've already created the calendar event, it will also proceed to the next step. So these two conditions will let us basically say, we're going to continue this Zap if this or this are true. So now in the last step of this Zap, we've continued, assuming that either this is blank, the emails are blank, or that end column has been modified in some way. And this Zap is going to be another update event in Google Calendar. So pretty similar to the third one, or the step 3 here for the update event. We're going to create that same Google Calendar account. If you scroll through, we don't actually have to add the description and summary because it's not overwriting that data. It's just finding the existing calendar event. So we don't have to add that here. Don't have to change the start time or anything. But what we do have to do is we have to add the attendees again. So using that Google Sheet, again, over here, we've got our name, email, name, email. Using those fields, we'll put in our attendees, 2 attendees in my case, and then we'll just close that out. Continue it, test it, make sure that it works. But this now is going to say, if we find an event in Google Calendar, but there's no event attendees on it yet, like this one here, it's blank, there's no attendees. Or let's say there is an attendee here, but we've now changed it. We've changed it from one to the other. Then what it'll do is it'll see that and it'll say, okay, let's continue. And then this last step will update that Google Calendar event with just the new attendees that are listed on your Google Sheet here. So they'll get a new invite, it'll close out the old one, it'll show unaccepted on your Google Calendar, and those new attendees will have to re-accept the invite. So that makes it so that one, if someone's declined it, you can easily update it just by changing their name here, and it will push that out and the new person will accept it. And two, it just makes it easier than having to go into Google Calendar and manually find that event and add the guests here on your own. So with that, that should automate everything you need to push those Google Sheet events into Google Calendar as a calendar invite. So now going back to our calendar, you can see what this looks like here. So I have this invite. As you can see, we don't have all the fields yet for this event. Once they come in my case, to Zapier, it will automatically push these to our Google Sheet, which in turn will push these to our calendar here. Just so we can see that updated, I'm gonna go ahead and find this event, April 23rd, in my Google Sheet here. And there it is. And I'm actually gonna go from the source into Zapier, and I'm going to update this from here so that we can see it push all the way through end to end, and you can understand how that works completely. So I'm going to update maybe a few of these fields just to make sure you can see it all. Test notes here. No props, we don't really need the rest of that stuff. No weights needed. Day of contact. Menu, Rachel. All right, so I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to trigger this webhook from our first video, how we went over that. Do a new task, just anything that we check off will trigger that. And this is still on. So now I'm just going to wait a second. Because I triggered that in Tave, that should be pushing to Google Sheets. So this one here should update. It doesn't look like we have a person on there yet, so I'm going to add myself on here since that is, I'm going to be working this event. And if we scroll over, we should start to see this update. There we go. There's those test notes that I just entered. So that means this one has updated. So I'm going to go into the Google Calendar now, and I'm just going to refresh my calendar. And this step may still be delayed a moment, but it should show up pretty soon. So let me open it up here and see. Boom, success. So now let's check out Google Calendar and let's see if this updated. It looks like my name's filled in there. Test notes, internal notes, that's me, my email address that was invited. So this has updated officially. So you can see someone, it's still awaiting an invite. I'd have to go in and accept this, obviously, as the employee for this event, but all the details have been filled out. So simple as that. Now I have that on my calendar. My employee, myself in this case, has been invited. They can accept that event, and scheduling is taken care of. So hopefully that helps you. If you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments or let me know. This is a bit more of a complex setup. There's really a lot of detail going into it, but once you go through all that, it's fairly simple in terms of what you need put together. But you can run into a lot of problems along the way, given that there's systems talking to each other in different ways, and you need to make sure you get those IDs and identifiers set. So again, let me know if you have any issues, any trouble. Happy to help out however I can, but hopefully this helps make your life easier and can help you accomplish one more thing with much less work. Thanks so much.